So first of all, thank you all for coming today. My name is Kirsten Schetzel, and I'm here with my fellow presenters, and we are going to speak in this order.
No, next slide has the.
I know, I'm pushing the down arrow and it's not going.
You have to go right.
Enter, hit enter.
Hit enter?
Or the,
Nothing.
either way.
This one?
Oh, click on the screen first because it's stuck on Zoom. So click on the
Enter.
screen.
Oh,
Oh,
Click on screen, just anywhere on the screen. Now hit enter.
and then, there we go. Now hit enter.
it is not moving.
Or hit the right arrow. There was a right arrow there that I was gonna be hitting.
Hard, and that's why we figure out the fun technology.
Huh.
It's not moving.
Let me see here.
No, you're fine. You can
Okay.
go back. You can go back and forward.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we've figured out how to move our slides. Hopefully we can figure out the rest of this. I'm going to speak very briefly and just give an overview of the current adult literacy context, some of which we heard in the plenary this morning. Sean Slack is going to talk about methods for building students' vocabulary. Then Joy Payton's going to talk about methods for using students' writing to develop their reading skills. Then Jen Vanek is going to talk about the role of AI in learners' academic and workplace lives, with ways to help learners become proficient in using AI appropriately. And then finally, Rebecca Fernandez is going to go over the relationship between learning difficulties and trauma in learners' lives. And she has some principles and practices to share with us to help learners experiencing these challenges. We will have questions at the end of each, whenever a person finishes. And if you are watching us online, if you want to put your questions in the chat, then we will read them and answer them so that everybody knows what is being asked. If you came in late, there's a handout at the back that discusses or has a picture of a book that we are raffling off. And if you want to put your name on one of the little white slips of paper and put it in the COA bag, we do have a couple of copies of the book to raffle off. So without further ado, I will just say that as we heard in the plenary this morning, this statistic was also quoted, 43 million adults in the United States today cannot read, write, or do basic math above the third grade level. And we are all here today because we are concerned about this, because we know that today even minimum wage jobs, such as working in a car park or a restaurant or a store, require workers to use computer software to make independent decisions and feel comfortable and confident making their decisions and find their own solutions to problems. So what are some of the reading skills that adult learners need? This is a list that goes from everything from basic decoding skills to figure out the sounds and the letters, to accessing word meanings, then looking at phrases and clauses, and then putting those phrases and clauses together to comprehend meanings from a whole text. They also need to think about discourse level relationships, the way one paragraph relates to another, the way one piece of writing relates to another. They need to develop various reading strategies and set and adjust goals for their own reading. They need to understand inferences, which can be very difficult for our learners, drawing on their prior knowledge. And they need to evaluate, integrate, and synthesize information, pulling information together. And they need to do all of that fluently. And they also need to be able to persist or to be motivated in order to keep going when they run into roadblocks or issues with their own reading. In the last couple of years, we've seen, as all of you know, a great change in what literacy skills our learners need. It's not enough to be able to read anymore. Even if you're taking a high school equivalency exam, you have to be able to read and analyze 2 passages, figure out the opinions that are expressed, take information from those passages and write your own essay using that information, which is a real step a lot higher in skill level than the way high school equivalency exams used to be. So we are here today, and we've put together a lovely panel to give all of us hope and confidence in helping our learners develop all of these skills. We are raffling off copies of a book that we have put together, published by the University of Michigan Press. And some of our chapter authors are here to speak to you today. I will also just, and the flyer that you found on your seat or got from the back will also give you a discount if you want to order it from the University of Michigan website. We also put together, Joy, Rebecca, and I, a few years ago, a similar book on writing and how to work on students' writing at all different levels of proficiency. So these 2 books are kind of, we see them as companions to help students learn productive and receptive reading and writing skills. So without further ado, I will move us on to our first speaker, who is Sean Slack.
Thank you. Good morning. Okay. Nope, we're not muted. Mute us and take us back off of mute.
Hi, can you hear me online now? Just say yes or no in the. They can hear me now? Did they say in the Q&A? Can you chat in the Q&A if you can hear me now?
Yes, we have a view. Yep. Okay, well, we'll use this mic then. Okay, fun. You know, like we always say here is, technology is great until it's not. All right, so basically what I'm saying is the third list down here, we're talking about what words that are related to the particular subject. That's what we want our learners to learn, the contextual meanings. Okay, and so here's a couple of people who talked about that, you know, that you might notice, Crash and Nagy and others, that just teaching the vocabulary is not significant word growth. Both the exposure to vocabulary in context and explicit and intentional instruction or attention to the meaning of the vocabulary in context is what's absolutely necessary. So you want to focus on the sub-technical vocabulary that you have, or tier two vocabulary, if that rings a bell with you. It's basically those cross-curricular words that have multiple meanings, their nuance, sophistication. Most of the time, they're prepositions, conjunctions, those pieces that put the language together that become confusing at times. And then, of course, we want to combine it with extensive reading. Now, that might be a little bit tricky if you're doing workplace literacy and the reading and the work you're doing is helping them fill out a job application or something. But, you know, there's lots of different ways to say things on job applications. So get them to read, maybe get them to role play, et cetera, and work on things. And then, of course, integrate that library with the vocabulary, with that reading comprehension, so they understand automatically and connect to the background knowledge that they already have. Again, going back to the job application, if they know the meaning of the words being used and they have a skill, they need to be able to correctly and properly communicate that they have that skill, help them connect to that skill and how to express it in English. So, what will give learners the most benefit? Planning the vocabulary instruction before reading and using. Be aware of their primary languages or syllabary or alphabet. What's the language distance between the two languages that your students have? Is it written left to right, right to left, top to bottom? Does it have a different syllabary? Is it Cyrillic? Is it Arabic style? Is it English? Or is it Spanish? And you can say, hey, you know what? You have all of these cognates that can help you out. Okay? And then, of course, some of the basics, the phonemes, the phones and graphomes, graphophonemes, and did I get that spelled wrong? I don't know. That transfer to the learner's primary languages and help them understand what's the difference between how we say syllables in English and maybe in your primary language. Preview and practice is heavy duty. Help them practice, do lots of role play, preview, you model, they talk, practice, and if they make mistakes, oh well. That's part of doing learning. Isn't that the very definition of learning, is making mistakes? Okay. And then, of course, some word study afterwards is fine. And that. So here's an example here. In the workplace, for job applications or listings, okay, wait a minute, the word listings. Wait a minute, list. List is a noun, a series of words, selling price, or selvage if you're a seamstress or a tailor. And I know that because I grew up with 5 of them. Okay, verb, to act, of making a list, or to tilt to one side. So that could get you in trouble if you're not getting the correct contextual meaning. So, which list is it that we're talking about? If you're reading a text that is may indicate the variety of those meanings, or it may not. Contextually, you might have some clues about which one. Okay, it may not even have a unified meaning. If you look at my fun little sentence here, the listing for the boat listed the sale price, but left out the list of reasons the boat lists. That was fun to come up with. Okay, how many different meanings for the word list? At least 3, right? Okay. So briefly, one quick and easy way to do it is focus on any phonemic awareness they have to have. So I have them, okay, so we'll do this in just a minute. I'll go through the list. B is practicing the word, and all of this is before they read or interact with it contextually. A sentence that they might see. D is the meaning that you want them to use at that time. That's contextual. And then E would be a practice model. And F is how are you going to see it used in the future. So let's see if we have some time here. Okay. Up. What happened here? Oh, right. That's right. I had two and I had to come and put it into one. So let's practice together, please. Everyone all together, and even out there in video land here, please say S. Okay, please say the word list 3 times. Go. Okay, and you might see it in the reading or on something that says, Humberto has a list of jobs. The definition that we're talking about list here is words in a column. So on a job application form, it may say list your skills. Chef, boss, teacher, student. That's a pretty good set of skills, right? Okay, so now here's your practice one to work with the person next to you or behind you. Here's my list of skills. Blah, 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 and blah, blah. Your turn. Go ahead and fill it in real quick. As many times as you can until I say stop. Go. Okay. Okay, friends, stop. How many times did you use the word list? Or did you just give me the list? Okay. If you just gave me the list, that doesn't help because I needed you to do what? Use the word list, please, in it. So make sure that if you're using this model, that you have your students read the whole sentence each time. And you'll find that they use it 4 to 5 times. They hear it, and they produce it. And then you're going to say, okay, in the job application role plays that we're going to do right now, you're going to see the word list. And that's what it means. And then have them practice. And then you go on to choose a couple more words. Not too many. So after the preview and practice, you want to do some reading and discussing. Okay, use the new vocabulary. If you don't use it, you literally don't get it. It does not go from short-term to long-term memory. Do some integrated word study. This might be where you talk about adding the ing at the end of the word, or s, or ed, or to list, anything that has to do with that particular word. And then do some more modeling and practicing for the comprehension strategies. Give them a variety of things. Branch it out a little bit, widen it out, add it, bump them up a little bit, and if they're slightly uncomfortable, then that's fine. They're learning. And then do more word study, even more if you need to after that. And if they're doing writing, what's writing going to be for a job application form? Filling out the form, right? How about a job description? Reading it, summarizing it, whatever it is, get them to use the words. So a strong vocabulary base needs time. And I forgot to add repetition. An understanding of the contextual usage. Lots and lots of model and practice. That development of becoming literate while learning the context was absolutely needed. And I'm preaching to the choir, right? Just say yes. Up next, okay. Are we doing questions now? Yeah. Okay, we have just a minute or two for questions and answers. You got the chapter's a lot longer than that, a little bit more information. You got the Warp Speed version.
Do we have any questions online? No. Any questions?
Anyone here? Yes. Did you have a question?
Oh, no, I was saying, looks like someone raised their hand.
Oh, somebody raise a hand. Ask Estara. Raise the hand, white hat. Okay, go ahead. Are the slides going to be shared? I don't have a problem with that.
Yes.
They should be
They're
now
not on
in
the
the
app
Wooba.
yet, they will be very soon.
That's the question.
I
Okay.
forgot we needed the microphone.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Can the person who raised their hand ask their question aloud? Can they say it?
Rebecca, I don't see a raised
We
hand.
see it up there.
Yeah.
But I don't see it.
Yeah.
No.
okay.
You have to go to participants and give them,
Oh, yeah, okay.
go to participants and then open participants and give them, you can let them talk, allow to talk.
Okay, Astara, if you are still willing, go ahead and ask your question if we can hear you.
she's muted.
Yeah, I gave her permission. Sorry, you have to unmute yourself. Or it was an oops. Okay. All right. Someone else? Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Hold on. For some reason, I'm a two-handed pad thing. I keep moving forward. No. Yeah, I'm trying, folks. This touchpad and my unhappy fingers. No. It won't. Yeah, Jen, you come up here because I'm not seeing you.
There we go.
Sarah had her, well, if you hide it too much, then we can't see your hands up, right?
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna just stick it in the corner here. I don't want to hide it completely, but we'll just stick it.
Okay, so Joy, are you next?
Yes.
Any other questions? Okay, and I'm in the system, so feel free to email me, send me whatever.
So what were you doing to advance
Enter.
the slides?
Yep.
There, okay.
Yep.
Oh, hold this, yeah. Okay, so Sean was talking about working with a reading text, and the research has shown that our ability to comprehend, work with, and build on a reading text increases when we also write about that text that we have been reading. And Timothy Shanahan, whom I'm sure you all know, he argues that when reading and writing are closely connected, they are closely connected when they draw on the same body of knowledge. So Sean talked about working with a reading text, and he's often called that a mentor text. And working with the vocabulary and structures. But once that text or a group of texts on a similar topic, same topic, have been read, then the class can move on to writing and working with those vocabulary and structures that they've learned, and he just talked about. This approach is talked about in very helpful ways in this podcast. How many of you are familiar with the Essential Education podcast about preparing adult students to pass GED and HiSET? You are, Jen? And you are. They're very helpful. And recently, this group, Essential Education, did about 5 different podcasts on developing reading skills. And I found them to be very helpful, and they're all available there. There are live links in my slides, and my slides are on the COABE website. And if you don't feel like going there, you can just write to me, joy@paytons.us, and I'll send you the slides if you'd like the slides for any reason in particular to watch those podcasts. So I'm going to talk about a few ways to connect reading to writing, but Kirsten already mentioned our books, but these things I'm saying so quickly because we have so little time are much more elaborated in these books. So just some things for you to think about. What texts do the learners in your classes read? What types of writing are they engaging in? What's the value of writing interactively? I'm going to talk a little bit about interactive opportunities in interactive writing. What specific strategies do you find most helpful, and what types of growth in engagement and reading comprehension are you seeing? And of course, what would be wonderful is if we could break into groups and discuss this, but we don't have time. Now, it's interesting because Kirsten already listed skills in reading, but these are the ones that are listed in one of these podcasts: identifying evidence, sequencing events, predicting order, comparing ideas, finding discrepancies in sources. And it's interesting because the lists don't exactly match. So it'd be nice to put them together. And then what are some best practices to build those skills? 1, read and reason. And you can see those. Think critically, look for repetition, and so forth. Read carefully and actively. use text structure, titles, headers. Consider a questions first approach. Read the questions at the end first. Consider the author's perspective. What is the author's perspective? Where's the author coming from? What's the author's purpose here? We have to do this increasingly now, I think. So, some activities. But before I talk about some activities, we just have to remember, and this comes from Rebecca, right here, Rebecca, who we'll hear from, that we do need to differentiate what learners are we working with, beginner, intermediate, or advanced. And you can see here how one could differentiate the instruction. And the things that I'm going to present, you might be thinking, well, that won't work with my learners, but the learners I work with, but how might I adjust it so it would work with the learners I work with? These are approaches that we are seeing now, discussed in the literature, free writing, research field notes, and so forth, long, and of course, increasingly digital literacy options. Now, I know KWL, okay, we all know that. We've been talking about that for years. You don't need to bring up that. What do I know? What do I want to know? And what have I learned? But in one of the podcasts, they mentioned the importance of recognizing, building on learners' knowledge and experiences in the instruction that we're doing. That's very important. And I'm wondering now if some of the learners that we're working with do not feel that their background and knowledge are being recognized and valued. So I just wanted to remind that this is one way to approach a writing assignment. What do I know? Earth temperatures are growing warmer. And of course, we don't all agree on that. Anyway, the podcast also talked about the important role of using graphic organizers. So this is a graphic organizer from Sean's work. Sean, who just talked. How many are familiar with this, Raft? I find it to be very helpful when I'm getting ready to, I've read and now I'm getting to write something. What's my role in this? Who am I writing to? What format am I using, and what is my topic, or what's my theme? So, for example, you can see my global warming is my theme here. But my topic is global warming. Okay, but what am I writing about that? I'm writing a news article. I want to summarize data with a closing argument and next steps. Who am I writing to? Very important. I'm writing to university students, and I am a university newsletter editor. That's going to shape my piece of writing, and there is a rubric for learners to use if that would be helpful. Now, the role of collaboration, interaction, and interactive discourse in the development of reading and writing have been discussed for the past several decades. For example, you know Lev Vygotsky, you know Michael Long. They talk passionately about the role of these things in learning overall. And of course, it's increasing now with digital technology. This particular podcast talks a lot about the power of collaborating, listening, empathizing in learning of those activities. And this author, Hathon Waite, I have a hard time saying that name, talks about the collaborative learning that it brings active construction of knowledge, enhanced problem articulation, and the benefits of exploring and sharing information. And I think you can kind of see enhanced problem articulation. Why? Because different people have different approaches to problems, and that comes out when we're doing collaborative learning. And then praying in hand, using writing with others to choose and define problems, develop and test inquiry models, examine findings, review theories and models, make persuasive claims is powerful. Here's an example, and again, from Sean. This comes from Sean's workshops, and I sure wish we could do this together in here because it's really interesting to do. But have the class gather in groups of 4. You could do that by level, by proficiency level, however you want to. Gather in groups of 4. You've already read a text or a series of texts. Each person begins writing a summary of the text, passes the paper to the next person only in that group of 4, who adds, and you keep passing the paper and adding to the sections. Pass the document around, each person reads the text, adds, and keep passing until the group considers it to be complete. Then, with the 4 texts now that you've written 4 texts together, pick one to work on together, cut it into 4 pieces, edit your section, put it back together, someone types it up for the group, and you share the piece with the rest of the group. Do you kind of get a sense that this can build perspective, because you're seeing multiple perspectives, different writing styles, different complexities of writing, different ways of thinking and writing about a topic? So I really like that exercise. Okay, dialogic teaching. Somehow creating dialogue. Sean had us engage in a dialogue. A study of the effects of dialogic teaching, you probably can't see that. I've got the references at the end though. That 6 elements of critical thinking, improve 6 elements, and you can see those elements there, including self-confidence, open-mindedness, and also improve 7 elements of social interaction, including a sense of responsibility, interactions, class dynamism, I like that term. Now, within interactive learning, I don't know how many of you have read about arguing to learn? Arguing to learn, which involves exploring perspectives by identifying what's being said about a topic, its main arguments, reading different perspectives in different texts, and then discussing those perspectives and writing about those perspectives, seeking to understand the various arguments. Another thing that we could really be doing now, analyzing evidence by examining the various positions, evaluating the strength of each claim, synthesize the arguments, build consensus, and generate solutions. So arguing to learn, I think, is a powerful approach. And also then interactive writing, dialogic writing, where that includes scaffolding. And back to Lev Vygotsky again, writing with another person who has a different perspective, possibly a higher level of proficiency, to build the learner's zone of proximal development. Where am I? And to build that. And of course, some of you know that I'm kind of passionate about interactive writing and dialogue journals. And dialogue journals now are being done between students, in groups of students, online. Janice Staten and I are really kind of passionate about them being done between a teacher and a student, because of course the student is learning a lot from the teacher, or at least a person, it could be a tutor, a mentor, somebody who's more proficient in either the language or the content, whatever we're working on. If we had time, it would be worth going through this dialogue journal interaction. It's between a deaf student at Gallaudet University and her professor. They're talking about the book 1984. But there are questions, there are opinions, there are, no, I don't agree with that, but I think that. So what's the student doing in this interaction? Exploring and trying out ideas, taking risks, expanding on the ideas that are expressed earlier. If we had time to look, we could see that in there. Asking questions, acknowledging the student's own confusion, seeking feedback, expressing ideas again in a different way. What's the teacher doing? Understanding and reflecting back, not correcting. There are no corrections in there. Explaining and expanding on concepts that were expressed by the student, saying them in a new way. Questioning, giving feedback, providing other resources that are relevant. We would see all that if we looked at that interaction. Now, I want to mention one last, I have 2 minutes to go, so we probably won't have any questions, but I want to, sorry, I'm taking too long. I wanted to mention one last thing which I find interesting. How many of you are familiar with force field analysis? It was created by Kurt Lewin as an organizing tool to help guide perspective on a topic with driving forces for this doing, or a topic or an idea or an action, and restraining forces. So for example, back to climate change again, the participants in this activity, you've read articles about climate change, read a bunch of articles, and now what are the restraining forces? What's limiting action on climate change? The driving forces. Recognition of extreme conditions, consensus among many scientists. What are the restraining forces? Non-climate friendly systems, denial of climate change and causes. And you could come up with a whole lot more driving forces toward doing something about climate change and restraining forces. And then either write a paper on one of those perspectives, another group writes on the other perspectives, and then you read to each other and you discuss it, or you write a paper with both perspectives in it. There are lots of things that could be done, and of course it needs to be adjusted according to learners' levels. But in the podcast, let's see, yes, in this podcast, they talk about the fact that in the GED and the HiSET, there are many different opposite perspectives for students to read and to understand. And the rest is just my references, and we probably don't have time for questions. One question? Yeah, we have time for one. Two, okay, any questions, comments? What?
I don't think they ever put their hand down. They never put their hand down.
Oh, so they just, okay, any questions or comments? Come on, somebody say something. Nothing to say? No. Okay, yeah, thank you.
In those journals, if I were to do that type of thing with my students, would I encourage them to use, or I guess it would depend on their level, to use or not use like translation?
Oh, use their native language? Okay, sorry.
I poorly phrased it too, and I don't know how to make it better, but if I were to do these types of dialogue activities, I don't have a question anymore. If I were to do these types of dialogue journals with my students, does it just depend on the level of the student on if I want them to use like if I want to allow them or encourage them to use translation devices, or is it completely up to them? I'm usually like an it's up to you kind of teacher, but I fear that they would just put it all in their native language into a translation device and then copy it down. Is that still helpful? Just want your expertise.
I mean, that's the question of the day. That's a great question. I mean, I kind of think it depends on what your focus is, what you really want to have happen, where you want things to be now, where you want things to go. I would think that it would be wonderful to start in their language, if you can manage their language, and then to try to grow. But Rebecca, you probably have a different view, because you were just telling me that you were using translation. Do you want to say something? Anyway, it's a very good question. It's a very good question. There is an article in Wikipedia about dialogue journal writing, in case you want to look at more examples and all that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna try this one more time. Can the people online hear me through this mic? Can you give us a yes or a no?
Okay, so I'm going to assume it's a no. Hello, I am Jen Vanek. I'm Director of Digital Learning and Research at the EdTech Center at World Education, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my chapter that's in this book on building digital literacy and reading in the digital age. Just going to spend a minute giving some context. So when we think about reading in the digital age, we're still thinking about reading, and we're still thinking about literacy in the way that we have in the past. So reading being the building blocks, the skills, the decoding, it's all still very, very important, as are the, considering the extended sociocultural context of that reading and figuring out what we mean by literacy within that situation. But now we've got this new wrinkle. We have multiliteracies, where we have the skills, we have the context of literacy, but we also have this these digital infrastructures that are coming in and actually have agency now with generative AI. So we need to think about, when we're using technology to support reading or to connect learners with reading, we really need to be thinking about these multiliteracies. All of these work together to support making meaning. And I see these as nested. So you cannot neglect the skills the building blocks, but you need to think about them in the context. Why are we reading this particular text? Is it for work? Is it for schooling? Is it for some other purpose? And that context will help inform the meeting, as will what technology you're reading. Are you on YouTube and like surprised to see the thing you talked about 5 minutes ago with your friend popping up as an ad to you? Right? Like, how are you going to read it? Like, that impacts the way you interact with that text too. So all of this works together in order to shape meaning out of text in the digital age. Much like just like I said, you need to like not neglect those building blocks, the decoding, the considering just basic literacies. You can take a lot of the things that you're doing right now in helping students develop literacy and helping students read when you're working through digital media. So you can still rely on some of these like metacognitive engagement strategies that you might use. For example, extending print-based reading strategies like pre-reading. It's still really important to have students work on pre-reading. So what are some of the pre-reading things that you all do with your students? Do you just throw a text in front of them and say, go? Yeah, talk about a picture. Yes, anybody else? What are other pre-reading strategies? Yes, use contextual cues within the text, like titles and subheadings. You should still do that with digital text. You can do that on websites or PDFs, things that come to them in digital content. Another interesting thing, Julie Coiro is an amazing literacy researcher who's done tons of work on digital literacies. And one of the things that she suggests, actually these next 2 tips, have students pause every once in a while and synthesize what they have seen online, just like you would if they were reading a chapter in a book or an article that you hand them. But what might be a little bit different is when that information also includes hyperlinks. Hyperlinks are what is simultaneously fabulous and devastating about having students read online, because they have power. They can go down a rabbit hole. They can actually have agency in selecting what they're looking at. However, they might not have the skills to discern what is important for supporting their comprehension and what is going to be completely distracting. So actually doing a tour of a site that maybe you're having students look at and problem solving with the class ahead of time, like, is this going to help us? Is this going to help us? Is this going to be distracting? And having some strategies, maybe even encouraging them to ask that question of themselves when they are dealing with digital text on their own. And then finally, super important to continuously nurture critical thinking skills. Information literacy is woven into one of these multi-literacies, as is media literacy. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about what those things mean, except to say that we need to be continuously reflecting when we're engaging with media and any digital content, considering the source, considering the message, considering the potential audience. Maybe even like double checking some of the things that are presented as fact in order to be reflective, critical readers as we're going through text. And students probably need some support with that. So there are 2 things, sorry, I meant to do this already, I'm gonna do it now. There are 2 things that I wanna spend 3 things I wanna spend a little bit more time on today, and that is around the technology side of this. So yes, you can do what you're doing normally to teach reading, all those great strategies you've learned about and are using in your classroom. But then some other things that you should be doing around digital content are to, in a classroom, find out what technologies your students already feel great using. Chances are many of them are using WhatsApp, especially if they're English learners. Use WhatsApp to help deliver whatever content you're doing. I've worked with an amazing ESL teacher named Nan Fryland. Anybody know Nan? Yeah, she's amazing. She works with LESLA learners, those learners who are really low literacy, perhaps interrupted formal education in their home language and home cultures. In the pandemic, Nan had never taught online, and within 2 weeks was delivering a full curriculum to her low-level English language learners through Google Slides and WhatsApp. So she took the time to figure out how to use it herself after she found out that that's what the students used, and she was able to come up with this whole lesson. In the chapter, this is spelled out a little bit more, and I also have a blog post I can share with you if you want to read a little bit more about Nan's work. But it was image-based, so that is actually a picture of her or one of her or somebody she knows on the steps of a library And they're just doing basic grammar and vocabulary here. They moved very slowly, delivering the decks in thematic vocabulary in order to get them to strengthen their skills. And while they were doing this, they were also building their digital literacy skills because they were accessing the Google Slides through WhatsApp. So they were extending and learning how to use a new technology. Another thing that I highly recommend is to, once you've practiced one of those skills, is to routinize using a technology. We talk a lot at the Tech Center and at World Education about using instructional routines that are rooted in technology. We call them EdTech routines. We, in the last couple of years, we've done some work with the U.S. Department of Education, OCTAE, through this initiative called Digital Resilience in the American Workforce. And one of the things that we put together for that was this Bridges digital interactive framework, which includes many opportunities to have students use technology through routines. So have you used instructional routines in the past? Like, what is when I say that word, what does that bring to mind to you? Like an exit ticket is an instructional routine. Having students do collaborative writing together could be an instructional routine. Basically, just placing any of those things within a technology makes it an ed tech routine. So if you go to Bridges, it's right there. Actually, if you're online, you can actually shoot that QR code with your phone, or the link is right there. So I'm going to show you for an example. We've got this routine. Let me just click over to it. Whoops, sorry. We've all struggled with this because no one has used this computer before today. So this is conducting a close reading of text using video meeting tools. So conducting close reading is an instructional routine that you might have your students do. But then we're going to weave this technology aspect of it into using annotation tools through on a video meeting. So you can check out these. This also actually builds critical thinking also. So I encourage you to check out some of the many instructional routines that you could access through that QR code, and I'll show it one more time. Okay, I am going to just hop along here. The next sort of technologically oriented strategy I want to introduce is actually using supportive technologies to help people read. There are two technologies that I played around with that do this. Has anybody used Microsoft's Immersive Reader with their students? Seeing some yeses, some nos. And then the other one is Adobe Acrobat Liquid Mode. Okay, so Immersive Reader, I am going to very quickly.
Immersive Reader is a free reading tool to help people of all ages and abilities. It's built into Microsoft apps like Microsoft Word, Microsoft Edge, and Microsoft Teams. Whatever your reading level, Immersive Reader is there to help. Let's see it in Microsoft Word. Find Word in the Start menu on your desktop or at office.com in your browser. Select View and Immersive Reader. Then choose one of the options. Column width changes line length to improve focus and comprehension. Page color can make text easier to scan with less eye strain. Line focus removes distractions so you can read line by line. Text spacing increases the spacing between words, characters, and lines. Syllables show breaks between syllables to improve word recognition and pronunciation. And Read Aloud lets you hear your document as each word is highlighted.
The Amazon rainforest.
Okay, there are also translation features embedded into Immersive Reader. Has anybody used it in their classroom with students? Okay, you can find a million instructional videos on this. I'm not going to go into all of the features, but suffice to say, I think it's a really worthwhile tool to check out. The other tool I want to talk about is Adobe Acrobat Liquid Mode. This works really well in classrooms that rely on PDF. There are not a lot of adult learning classrooms that rely on PDF. However, they do exist. One where I completed a study a couple of years ago was a CNA classroom. All of the curriculum was available to students on PDF. And now these students, have you tried to read a PDF on your phone? Right, you have to stretch it and zoom and move things around. It's impossible. what Acrobat, so Adobe Acrobat Reader is free. You put that app on your phone, you open up a PDF through it. All of a sudden, you can control what the text looks like by hitting this little ink drop icon. So not only does it reflow the text, it also gives you collapsible sections, which are amazing for learners because then they can use the context cues of the text to understand what's coming. If you are interested in trying this out, well, this is some of the, so in our study we found the learners and teachers found that it aided their comprehension. It supported reading on the go, which is what our adult learners need. One interesting thing is that the learners tended to overcorrect, which then inhibited their comprehension because look what it did to the screen. Like like that's a new word. They're probably not going to know that they've broken the text by extending it too big. So I encourage you to try it out. World Education has a wonderful reader for adult learners called the Change Agent. We have hundreds of free articles linked through here and also some instructions about how you could integrate reading through this free Adobe Acrobat Reader and Liquid Mode. Okay, finally, that was actually AI. All of that stuff I showed you was AI, which is a whole other presentation. But here's a really great tip for you if you're thinking about integrating generative AI into your instruction. I think a fabulous place to start is to consider prompts. If learners have really good prompts, or if teachers use really good prompts, it makes it much easier to control the information that you're getting back. We held a service learning event where we had teachers get together to learn about using generative AI in their instruction. And then together we generated 100 prompts. I'm from the upper Midwest, we exaggerate everything. And where we're using this RACE of frameworks, where in the prompt you put in the role of the role, like AI, you are a teacher. You want to teach grammar. You are working in adult ESL, so that's like action and context, example, and you basically tell it what you want it to do using these specific lines in the prompts. So I'll give you one example before I wrap up. So here's the example lesson. You are an instructor in a community-based ESL classroom. I want you to write a rhyme and a rhythm and blues song about shopping, involve these parts of speech. In the song, make explicit connections between the parts of speech and the function and give some examples. And then we provide an example. Now, I have been trying for about 24 hours to put these slides into the chat. Oh my God. Okay. I will keep trying to get our slides in the app. I don't know why I keep uploading them, they're not there. But if you'll have access to the actual examples here. And this is actually a rhythm and blues song that was composed in like 30 seconds by ChatGPT and Bard, and you can listen to these things here. So that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions or if you would like me to send anything that I've talked about to you, please do email me. It's at jen_vanek@worlded.org. Thanks so much. Yeah, the RACE framework. That's in writing a prompt. So you would go, it's just basically the structure of a good prompt. And I need to send people this open prompt textbook. Currently, our media in World Education is undergoing a thorough review to make sure it aligns with new federal guidelines on communicating things about teaching and learning. And so until this website's become republished again, I need to give you access directly to things. And that's why I really do want you to email me if anything I said is of interest and you would like access to these things. Yes, sir. Well, I think one of the things, context is essentially important, like where are they going to be using the language? You mean like adult learners, adult ESL students? I think you just need to move more slowly. You can still use tools like this. But you just need to consider carefully the context, the vocabulary that you want them to learn. Yeah, that's really great. And so a lot of the strategies that Sean recommended for vocabulary would be really important. I also recommend teaching the language of technology if you're using technology. Pause and teach the vocabulary of the technology so they can actually ask questions about the technology. And if you go to the Bridges Digital Action, the Bridges tool that I showed you, Bridges Interactive Toolkit, there are technology vocabulary exercises in there.
I'll also add that the Oxford Picture Dictionary released a new edition, the Third Plus, and that has new vocabulary that's related to technology. And there's a teacher presenter tool so that you can present it much better. Their website.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Rebecca. So also, I wrote a chapter for the reading and for the reading volume on working with students who have learning differences. And I sort of riffed from that chapter to talk a little bit more about the effects of trauma on reading and the ability to process reading. Because on the surface, in some ways, reading disabilities and responses to trauma in the act of reading are not very different. And so given the current context, I thought it would be useful to sort of conclude by reflecting a little bit on specifically the impact of trauma on reading. So what is trauma, right? So it is a condition that results from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that someone may experience, either as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has adverse lasting effects on their functioning and all aspects of their well-being, including mental, physical, social, emotional, spiritual. For migrant students, asylum seekers, refugees, significant sources of trauma and stress, which impact their ability to read and perform academically, include migration stresses. So like the reason that they left the country that they left, the journey that they went through to get here. Once they get here, the stresses of acculturating that then maybe are compounded by sort of the political and social climate and all of the fears that induces in the individual and a community, in the people around this individual. So you all work with adult learners, but the person may be under a lot of stress because a family member is experiencing this as well. The effects of trauma, as the definition, the prior definition suggests, affects every aspect of an individual, the emotional, the behavioral, the physical. What I want to point to here is the cognitive effects. So when we're thinking about the act of reading is often described as a cognitive one, although as Joyce has lovely described in a very nice way, it does involve lots of sort of mediated interaction with other people and co-construction of knowledge and all of those things that we tacitly acknowledge every time we have students do any kind of literacy activity with another person, right? But when we look at just the act of reading on an individual basis, we have to think about the effects of the importance of memory, attention, the ability to regulate, self-regulate and focus and remove distractions. All of those cognitive or socio-cognitive dimensions of reading are impaired in many ways when someone is hyper-aroused in a situation where either they come into the classroom, something happened at home, or they read something in the news, and they're just, their hackles are up, they're not ready to learn, they're not in a calm state, right? And so it makes it really difficult for them, as much as they're there, they showed up, they're not fully ready if they're in that hyper-aroused state. So there's much, I'm not going to read the slide. I do recommend, if you're interested in this topic, this work by Perry, Fear and Learning Trauma-Related Factors in the Adult Education Process, is a real, a seminal work. I highly recommend it. He points out that what I've just said about, when someone is in a state of alarm, in a state of hyperarousal, they can't concentrate, they're more anxious. They pay attention to the nonverbal cues much more than what's happening in the text that they're supposed to be reading. I have all sorts of stories of when I taught ABE and once having shown a picture. It was a classic American Revolution picture that had a guy who had been tarred and feathered. It was a guy who was tarred and feathered, and he was on a tree. Well, you can imagine the response that generated in some of my students. And it didn't even cross my mind at the time. I'm like, this is like a civics class, Didn't cross my mind. They went right there. And it was very difficult. I had to kind of bring down the temperature and try to help to contextualize that image. It was it's classic like image of the American Revolution. I've done lots of things that I've learned from when I was teaching adult ed and adult migrants. Lots of things that I would not do again that I had to learn on the job, and this was one of them. The other point that Perry makes is that when you are in that state of hyperarousal, routine, to sort of touch on Jen's comment about instructional routine, predictability, is one of those things that kind of that calms the person down. Even though learning is all about novelty, right? About sort of pushing the learner to go one step further and to challenge themselves. Sometimes in that situation, the novelty that is required for new learning actually produces more stress and anxiety than is needed, right? Or that is appropriate. Okay, so we've talked a lot, all of us, interestingly enough, we've all touched on different models of reading and different models of literacy. I teach a class every fall called Bilingualism and Literacy, and I go through the class through many different models of reading. And the most basic, those of you who've worked in family literacy, who've worked with children, who are familiar with the science of reading know the simple view model, right? It's just like, what is it to read? Decoding plus language comprehension equals reading comprehension. We've all heard that. Over the years, my students have been working with emergent bilinguals in the community, and they've had, pre-COVID, post-COVID, all sorts of issues going on right now that have forced us to really rethink that very simple model, that it's not that in reality reading is not that simple, right? That if you can't self-regulate, if you can't attend, if your memory is impaired, if you have all sorts of psychological trauma and issues that you bring with you to the reading occasion, it's very difficult to read. And this model by Duke and Cartwright, I feel like, represents that really well. It reminds us that reading is not just about decoding. It's not just about learning words. It's not just about all of the things that we do that are important. Building on prior knowledge, developing vocabulary, learning about structure. All of that, yes, that's all part of reading. But if you can't get the learner to attend, and if you can't get the learner to fully retain, you're not going to get anywhere, right? So when I worked with lower level adult migrant students who had grown up in camps, who had been through all sorts of traumatic experiences, there were moments where I just didn't feel like they were just like blanks, They were there, they would show up, but sometimes there was that sense that nothing was getting through. And if you've worked with those learners, you know what I'm talking about. Nothing was sticking, and we were talking about this morning, that I felt like I often had to deliver the same lesson in 10 different ways on the same material, because things would not stick. And a model like this, if you need one for training to your teachers to try to explain, you know, why it is that students are having a hard time learning to read, why they're stalled in their process. Sometimes it is these sort of affective factors that may be the explanation. And we have, you know, this is just a study that was done that with younger children. So if there isn't a lot of research on this with adults, but we know from younger children that traumatic experiences directly affect reading achievement. And if your reading achievement is delayed or does not fully advance by a certain point in your life, you know, we know that statistic of, you know, if children aren't reading by the end of 3rd grade, they're more likely to drop out. There's all these statistics. Well, imagine who are those, like how many of the folks that we work with had those experiences, are coming to us because they didn't read at a 3rd grade level, you know, at one point, and they were sort of like, all of that, those gaps, they sort of, those gaps followed them throughout their academic lives until they got to the point where they were no longer attending school. So what can we do? So really that's what we're all here for. What can we do about it, right? So definitely, so there's another study on trauma and adult learning by Kirka, that's a very good one. Some of these sources are pretty old. I'd try to find more up-to-date ones. But again, it's an area that, while it's very relevant to our daily practice, you know, the research on it, you know, we're busy enough, right? So it's difficult to kind of put this all in writing. 2 minutes, okay. So creating a safety in learning, thinking about reading as more than just the act of decoding and making sense of an individual text, but that we've got to attend to the whole person. They need to feel safe. There needs to be, you need to know your limits, right? So if, you know, you may bring in other people into the classroom, into the reading experience to try to help you, or seek out professional development opportunities. Know when you do need to reach out, or when bringing someone in could be really helpful. So for example, I work with someone who does family literacy, whose office is next to a nonprofit that does art therapy. And she brings in art therapy practitioners on a regular basis to do some of that work of sort of like reducing the hyperarousal, and to get those parents ready to learn so that then they can help their children. There's a lovely project that's from Texas actually, that took place in El Paso, that sort of represents, it's just it's inspiring. I have an undergraduate student who did a capstone project in the fall on this. She was on the border working with migrant organizations and was really inspired by this project, in which so it was family literacy. There were children doing artwork in the detention centers and in shelters, and then there were community people who were helpers who were interviewed, and there was a weaving, a sewing circle in which women were able to tell their stories, and all of those pieces together became part of this exhibit, and it's been a very sort of cathartic. It was a cathartic experience for those who participated, as well as the community members who have gone to the exhibit. It's available online, by the way, so you can always go and see it. Palanak and his colleagues in the UK at University of Leicester did an interesting study as well, looking at this idea of well-being in refugees and learning, and sort of what can be done to facilitate learning in the adult education classroom. And they also suggest really great strategies and resources for primarily adult learners who are learning English. They interviewed the teachers, they interviewed administrators, they interviewed the students to ask them what worked for them. And you can read the different testimonies and what worked, you know, this idea of the students feeling part of a community within the classroom, outside of the classroom, the teacher showing consideration, knowing that students were, you know, they were coming to class from jobs. And so a lot of like what it took to sort of calm down the classroom and get everyone focused had to do with just acknowledging the difficulties that everybody's experiencing. But the thing that I thought was most noteworthy based on my past experience is that first comment, I don't want to remember my previous life because not good for me. Very, very, very bad experience for me because political situations, problem, and human rights problem, unfortunately, and I don't want to remind. You know, on the one hand, we want students to tell their stories, and for some students, those stories are really cathartic and really important to their healing and their learning, right? So they're writing their stories, they're telling their stories, other people are reading their stories and learning from their stories. But also to remember that sometimes telling one story isn't the best thing and giving students choices. So in this piece, they say, you know, you can always give the students the choice. You don't have to tell your story. You can tell somebody else's story. And you can learn from reading another person's story. So it's just a little caveat that I thought, you know, when I was very inexperienced, I thought, yes, everybody tells their story, but not everybody's ready to tell their story. And time. So, so be structured and predictable. Teach small amounts of material at a time because of retention, because it's so difficult to remember things. Include opportunities to introduce the material in many different ways using many different senses. Build on learners' strengths and their prior knowledge. And I will go, yeah, and use assistive technology when necessary. I think more than when necessary. I think assistive technology nowadays can enhance all of this. And that's it. Thank you.